Hey everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Adobo and Avocados. My name is Marie, and
I'm Nicole van der Hoeven. Hello, welcome back.
yes, we did that introduction really good.
Yes.
Oh, what's the
What's
echo?
wrong?
Oh, I think I've got an open tab with with our live stream, so I just heard some echo noises. But anyway, yeah. So we're back with another episode. We don't have any special guests with us today because Nicole and I decided that for this week we're gonna speak about a topic that's I think it's not just us who's experiencing this, but it's I think ever since maybe since the pandemic, or maybe it's like something that has occurred before, but it's much more emphasized, I guess, like recently, as well, with all the different like events. So I figured we can talk about burnout. But the twist in this episode, so rather than just talking about it from like how other people will talk about it, Nicole and I decided that we're gonna talk about it from, the perspective of how is burnout similar to an overloaded system. So we're gonna try and talk about it from a technical point of view as well, but mainly Nicole. in this case, yeah.
Well, the reason that I wanted to talk about it with this slant is that I realized that when I think about, like, oh, how do I get myself out of burnout or how do I prevent burnout in the future for myself, it's really vague, or
Mm,
like I might know in general what to do, but I have a hard time putting it into practice. And
yeah.
then I did another video with another friend of mine also on burnout. You can tell this has been on my mind recently.
Yeah.
His name is Andy Polaine, and I was talking to him, and I realized that there are actually a lot of similarities between the burnout of a human and the overload of a system. And the difference for me is that I'm a performance tester, so I know how to deal with overloaded systems.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that level of abstraction is just enough for me that I feel like, okay, I know what to do with that. So maybe I can apply what I know on the technical side to myself. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see, yeah. But I guess before that, should we define first, what burnout is? Like, what does it mean for us? So do you want to start first, and I'll go after?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are different ways that burnout can present in people.
Mm,
But I think in general, it is emotional, physical, and mental, and maybe psychological as well.
mm,
Exhaustion
yeah.
just from chronic stress. So when you've been dealing with something for a very long time, whatever that thing is, at some point, you're going to get to a state where you start to act out because of that. So sometimes acting out can look like shutting down. It's like a fight or flight response. Some people fight, some people just shut down and they go into flight mode. They're like, I don't want to deal with this, or I can't deal with it. So it could be something like physical fatigue and not being able to do anything with your body anymore. Some people just like want to lie down and not do much of anything. They either sleep too much or too little. Sometimes it's a mental thing. It's like this sense of futility, like, oh, nothing that I'm going to do is going to matter, or just a sense of overwhelm in the face of many things that you need to do. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's similar along those lines because it's great that you mentioned it. It's not just the physical exhaustion, but there's also the emotional side, the mental side, and I guess this is a great way to differentiate that burnout. For me, for example, would be different to what burnout feels to you, or what it feels to other people. So yeah, I guess apart from that, like you've also mentioned that it's when that person goes into that fight or flight mode. I totally agree. So I think it's when if you start feeling like tired as well, like mentally, physically, emotionally. You feel helpless as well. And like some people, they can also feel, I guess, detached, on like certain things that, they enjoy, they suddenly, not, want to do it anymore, or they don't have the energy, to do it. So maybe like now that we've defined like what burnout is feels for us, like how, like what like how is it related to, I guess, an overloaded system. So now that we have an idea as to what burnout is.
So I think that burnout is a type of overload for humans, but what that looks like in a system can also vary in the same way that it can vary between humans. In systems or applications, it could be anything from slowness in different components to like a complete lack of or miscommunication between components as well. It could be because it could be that many of the components are affected, or it could be just one that is experiencing that. So it could be increased latency. It could be downtime at its worst. It could be just a complete shutdown of the entire application and an inability of users to access it at all. It could even be like an inconsistency or reliability problem where the input that users are putting into the system doesn't any no longer generates the expected output. So it could be
Yeah.
the fact that the system is giving errors in response, or is giving just rubbish basically back when it should be giving something that the user expects. So I think it can also vary per system.
Yeah.
When you say overload, there's not like a specific definition of it. And sometimes systems can be overloaded but still be okay,
Yeah, I was
or at
gonna
least
mention that.
externally.
Yeah, because like when we mention, like overloaded, like it could mean like one or two things. One is like it could just happen like instantly, but I think with burnout, and like maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but from like my experience, like it's more of like a subtle and gradual build up. Like I don't think it happens, like overnight where we suddenly wake up and we just feel, oh, like I'm burnt out. So like similar with an overloaded system, it could be like a subtle degradation over time, where we're not really I guess taking care of, like, doing patches or like updates. Then the system can like just degrade like over time naturally. So I think we can also link like burnout to that. Like if you see there are signs and symptoms, but then like I think at the beginning it's very subtle, you don't notice it like straight away. But then if you don't do anything about it, or if you just keep on doing what you're doing without really um taking care of the signs and symptoms, then yeah, this could lead to a major breakdown.
So maybe we can talk about why this happens in the first place in both humans and systems. I
Mm,
think that for systems, the one of the main causes, there are only a few real reasons why they get overloaded. One is maybe there's insufficient internal resources. So it could be that the servers that the components are running on are just being maxed out in terms of CPU utilization or memory, or it could be bandwidth related.
mm,
And normally this is the only way that you can solve this. If it is if it is a problem of it just not having enough resources, is either having it do less, or making it so that it's spec'd up, so like scaling it up in some way so that it has more to play with to begin with. And I think that that holds true for humans as well. I mean, there are some ways to scale up your capacity. I think that this is where productivity comes in, right?
mm.
Where there are ways to improve how much you're doing without sacrificing too much.
Yeah. Yeah, this is where like setting boundaries as well can help. I know we've we've talked about like setting boundaries like, like countless times during our catch up, but I think yeah, this is where you really need to use those tools, make sure that you are, like focus on the things that you are focused on and not getting like distracted. And this is where, having a clear set of boundaries can really help you.
Yeah. So maybe I'll talk about the main causes. One is insufficient internal resources. The
Yeah.
second is unexpected traffic or demand. So something
Mm.
external that that suddenly, for whatever reason, maybe even not so suddenly, it could be gradual as well, um, starts to stress out the system in a way that is unprecedented. Or it could be not that the traffic is so high or that the load is too heavy to bear. It could be lower levels of load, but for
Mm.
just a longer period of time than the system was really built to be able to withstand. It could also be inefficient processing. So it's things like maybe requests aren't being processed in the fastest or most optimal way, and
Mm.
that's causing some performance bottlenecks. And then the last one that I identified is infrastructure or like processes issues. We see
Mm.
this a lot in microservices based systems
Yeah.
where the move from a monolith, from like a single server that is also a single point of failure, to like many more points of failure, can be a good thing in that it can be more resilient. But on the other hand, that also adds extra complexity,
Mhm.
and it can make a system even more susceptible to overload. I guess maybe let's talk about what each of these looks like in a human. Like insufficient internal resources, that just means I think you don't have enough time or
Yeah.
the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to process what's going on. I think we're really expected to deal with a lot, right?
Yeah, and not just with work, but I think work does play a big role in people's life, because like most of us, obviously we are on a 9 to 5 job, or like 5 days or like 4 days a week. So it is a big role, and there could be some unprecedented things that might come up, either in work or personal life, like certain issues that um we sometimes basically can't handle, like all those like, I guess, like different like stressors. So yeah, I guess like from a human perspective, we are all like vulnerable to be in that position, because there's just one of us, and especially if you're not used to asking for help, then that can definitely, yeah, lead to burnout.
Yeah. I think this is one of the ways in which humans are not like machines, that you can't
Mhm.
just say, do parallel processing or do multi-threading because it's not that easy. We can't clone ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't switch like that, and that
Yeah.
makes it difficult. I think some things that I try to do to improve how much I have to give is related a lot to self-care. So
Mm.
like, things like working out or going for a walk, that
Yeah.
improves my capacity to go back and attack a problem with more intellectual vigor than I previously had.
Yeah, that's really important, because from personal experience, like, I think some people, for example, they view exercise as, I guess like the major reason is, yeah, like people want to lose weight. But I think now, you know, I see exercise as a way, to not, I think the losing weight is just a like by, like a byproduct, but really the main benefit that I get from like exercising, or from working out, is that self-care, perspective, that you do feel better, after, and you're basically more, I guess, like refreshed as well. So if you just in a middle of like, I don't know, like a stressful like situation, like taking walks like they do, work, or just like getting your body to move, at, like whatever time or something, then it does, really help in terms of getting you out of that just mental, I guess, like burn down, like issues. So definitely like working out and exercise is my top one, like self-care as well.
I also want to point out that in terms of insufficient internal resources, there's like what we do with systems is we scale them, right? So
Mhm.
scalability is the process of being able to increase, to ramp up how many resources you have available,
Yeah.
and also to ramp down. What I find, and this is one of the ways where I'm like, oh yeah, I do this, I understand this for my work, but I don't really do it for myself, is I
Mhm.
think for myself I'm pretty good at ramping up. You know, if
Mhm.
you tell me like, hey, I really need you to focus on this is your one thing, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, fine, I'm focused, I'm ignoring everything, let's go. That I'm fine with. I don't do the ramp down very well.
Yeah.
And when you're working on a project, this is this is just as essential, because one of the limited resources you have to contend with is budget.
Yeah.
Because you don't have an unlimited budget to just scale up clusters or instances in AWS or something. You That can't happen infinitely. It can happen for a small amount of time, but it's just not feasible to continue. So part of that scaling up is the knowledge that you're going to be able to scale down
As well.
when you are able to. But as a person, I don't do that very well. Like once I scale up, I'm like, okay, what's the next one? you know, I
Yeah.
just get like wild-eyed and I want to do everything,
Yeah.
and that's not really healthy.
Yeah, it's not sustainable in the long run. And I think um it's also linked to, I guess, certain people's personality, like what I found. So I found that, people who have like certain personalities or like characteristics, they are more prone to getting burnout. So one example is like we did that enneagram test personality, and I got my result, and my personality type was the perfectionist, and then closely linked to the achiever as well. And then what I found was people with those types of personality, they are more, prone to getting burnout, just because of like, you know like certain like traits that they have already. um but yeah, I think it's also like link to, more to, I guess, like certain individuals. So if you are the type of person who wants to go the extra mile, then like in the short term that might really work, but yeah, long run, not sustainable, and you do need to ramp down, like you said.
I was trying to find out what I was. I can't remember the number, but
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure my higher one was the challenger.
the
And
challengers.
I really love the idea of pushing something to its limits and maybe a little bit more. Unfortunately, I do that to myself too.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for it's a great thing to be when you're a performance tester and you're trying to find out different ways in which things can break. It's not so good when the thing that you're trying to break is yourself.
Mm. Yeah, I'm just reading like, because I think, yeah, there's this different like descriptions for the different personality. So maybe what we can do is, after the show, we can definitely like share the link in case, there are people who
Yeah.
want to find out what their personality type is.
So the other reason that systems get overloaded was unexpected traffic or demand.
Mm.
And I feel like we see this on a human level a lot as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've added on like our talking points is that like the concept of, sharding. And I just like related that. So say for example, on a, on a system, like a sharding is where you partition, like, I guess, big databases, and then you break it down into like smaller, manageable parts. If we relate back to humans, like say you have a big chunk of work, and if you don't partition that, or if you don't shard that, in a way that is much more manageable, then you are, prone in like reaching that burnout stage. Because if you just tackle like a very big task, and you don't have, I guess, like some boundary set, or some, plan on like how you can break it down into much smaller, manageable like tasks, then that's gonna be harder to accomplish. But if we break down into, like smaller chunks, and then just focus on tackling, one issue one after the other, I think that is much more like manageable in the long run as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think having bite-sized chunks is a lot less daunting to do than like an entire project or an entire database. And it is also more performant because if
Mm,
something goes wrong when there's a request that's sent for a particular row in a database,
yeah,
if it's sharded, then you're needing to retrieve less. And if something happens at that time, if there are performance issues, then you're not going to you're going to lose less than if you had if there was more of the database that you wanted to get that you really didn't need.
yeah,
I also think that like this unexpected traffic for humans, it could be projects like you said. It could also just be noise. It might be things that you don't even really need to action. There's so much that's going on all the time. Like we are
yeah,
constantly talking to the world and the world is constantly talking back.
yeah.
Oh, that actually reminds me of this book. It's a fictional book. It's called The Knife of Never Letting Go. And
Mm.
it's like post apocalyptic. Humans have landed on a different planet. And there's a weird thing with this planet where the thoughts of humans are constantly heard by everybody else.
Oh, wow.
But the world is also constantly talking back. So you're
Mm.
also hearing like the thoughts of birds that are flying by. And at first it's like it's interesting, but then it gets intrusive because you
Yeah.
can't block it out. And there's just so much talking. Some of it is important, most of it is not. And we
Oh my
need to
god.
put up these boundaries to to filter the noise.
Yeah. I guess if we link that back to work, like distractions such as, so much like Slack notifications, so many emails, that I think if you just constantly try to look at these different messages, then these are noises. So having, I guess, a plan on like when are you going to reply to emails, or muting Slack notifications, so whenever you're like focused on doing work, you're not distracted. And even with phones, I still need to be better at this, but um I know that, like, for example, like some people, they're constantly like, they have their phones like on their desk. And um it's like if you go to a casino, it's like those machines where you just can't stop with all the, like putting all the coins, because you want to get more, you want to get more. Like phones are like that too. There's, the notifications, there's, the pings, like the different, distractions. And if you're not careful, if you're just constantly bombarded with all these distractions, then yeah, that's a easy, route to like getting burnout.
Yeah, for me, this notifications thing is like an ongoing project. I try to be really good with it. I don't my phone is constantly on do not disturb. So
Yeah,
I always miss phone calls. That's fine. Who calls me anyway? Like on the phone. It's rare that I actually need to talk to someone on the phone.
yeah,
I that way I don't get any notifications for like messages either
Yeah.
on my phone. And then even like I turn for Slack because we use Slack for
Mm-hmm.
at work, and I don't have notifications turned on anywhere, even on my computer.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm doing something, so my Slack is off,
Yeah.
and I also have like Discord stuff that's all off. Anything where, like by default, when you get a comment on YouTube, you get an email, I turn that off immediately. I hate anything like that. I have done a lot of work on my inbox to this is kind of like load balancing. So when in a system when you have a lot of traffic, one of the first things you do is to make replicas of things. So
Mm,
this is part of scaling horizontally and increasing the amount of resources that you have to play with. But you still have to figure out how to route that traffic. And this
mm,
is where a load balancer comes in. There are different algorithms for determining where the traffic goes. Sometimes it's like round robin, so first this one, then that, or it can be smarter than that. But you do have to have a way of doing some sort of triage. And the way that I do this is like for my inbox, my email inbox, I I try to set up these filters, so like if it has Kickstarter or something, okay, then it goes into my Kickstarter folder because I back a lot of Kickstarter projects, and it's just a lot of updates. Every project like updates at least once a month or something. Um, or if it has the word receipt,
mm.
then that's just something I've bought, so it goes into my shopping folder. And the thing is, it skips my inbox entirely. So the idea is to eventually get to the point where the only things in my inbox are those from real people.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's like, yeah, that's very efficient. I don't think I've said it. I don't think I've said anything like that on my on my mailbox. But one thing that I do, so for example, now my notifications are off, but I put it in like work mode. So it's great now that we have, like features like this, because like for example, people like me, I don't want to completely turn off notifications. Say, for example, there's an emergency from my daughter's school. So I've allowed like certain people that can only contact me during, my working hours. So at least this is still sort of, I think this is still kind of, related in a sense of I am, allowed like focus time. I have, my phone with me, but I'm not constantly bombarded by notifications from like other like platforms, like other channels. But if there are like actual emergencies, so if I don't know, there's a call from school, or if there's a call from my parents, and at least I'll still be able to do that. So it's just all about really finding ways that really, like work for you, and like sticking with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think email is a good example of the things that like one email is not so bad, right? But
Mm,
it's just when there's a lot of them, then it really builds up. Or it
yeah.
could be that it's not like a spike of email, but
Yeah.
it's like just a constant trickle. And that was the third thing that I mentioned, which is a system can get overloaded when it has to deal with lower levels of load, but for a long time. This is where usually we get into memory issues. Like there are memory leaks where if you run a single test for an hour, it's like, oh, it's actually doing fine, it's responsive, and it's performing within parameters. But if you extend the same test, or even like a slightly lower level of that test, and you do it for a day, there are you start to see issues from memory leaks of various components. So it could
Yeah.
also be that it's just the trickle feed of email or whatever messages you're getting
Yeah.
that overload you.
Yeah. Maybe we can link this back to our roles as developer advocates, because like for me, for example, like when I first started my work as dev role, like um there was a period where like people would message me, whether that's LinkedIn, or whether that's the community, like Slack channel. And because these are like support questions, like I, like feel the need, to respond to help them. But over time, I gradually realized that, this isn't helping me or them as well, because it increased that sort of like dependency, where if I guess a person asks for a question, then they would always expect answer like all the time. And there's also the problem of like, what if another person has the same problem? Then if we just have that conversation like privately, then that wouldn't really help. So the boundary now that I've set is, if there are any messages like that, I just direct them to, hey, maybe you can ask this on like the public channel, so at least it's not just me, answering like all the different like support questions. And that's also advantageous to other people who have the same problems. Like they can just, check the forum, or like if they want to check like the response. But if you're just constantly, responding to all these different messages, then yeah, it's not good.
This is where I find the analogy to an overloaded system useful,
Mm,
because I also struggle with that on a human level. I mean, I feel the same, exactly the same way, everything that you said. Um, with the system, if there were a system that were displaying a memory leak, of course you would try to fix the memory leak through code. Honestly, sometimes you can't. Sometimes there's a
mm,
point beyond which you just can't do it.
yeah.
And if you get to that point, then one, garbage collection. So garbage collection is um, there's something in programming. So for example, if you declare a variable and then you define it, so you say like x equals whatever, blue, and then you put it in a loop where you're doing that when you're reinstantiating a variable on each instance of the loop, and you're saying, okay, now create a new one, a new x, this one is called red. That actually uses up more memory than if you had just reused the previous one.
Mm,
So so systems get into the state where the memory leaks out, like increases, their utilization of memory increases over time.
yeah.
And there is a way that you can code around that, make it a little bit better, but it's still not going to completely change the problem, fix the problem.
Yeah.
And what I would do is do a garbage collection, or like tune that. A garbage collection is a point where the program stops and gets rid of all of these objects that you defined and used once and then never again. The problem with that is when you do garbage collection, it tends to block up that thread, because it is intensive. It
Yeah.
in itself is taking up memory. So there is an element of like, hey, I can't respond to all of these things right now because right now I'm trying to sort out which are the ones that are important. But
Yeah.
that triage is necessary. And if you don't do it, then you're stuck in a loop where you're just responding to everything. The
Yeah.
other thing is just a restart. um, Part of the beauty of Kubernetes is that when you have declarative configuration, you don't have to make a decision on an individual level. Like you don't get attached to it. You're just like, hey, if it isn't healthy anymore, then throw away that pod and start another.
Mm,
And that is one of the principles of working within a Kubernetes cluster, that you don't get attached to your infrastructure, that you treat them as cattle, not pets. And it seems really harsh, but we can't do that with ourselves. We get attached to things. We
to
get
everything.
attached to a
Yeah.
person that comes to us with a problem.
Yeah.
And there is a point where you're just like, I'm sorry, it's not you. I just can't deal with this. Like, I am just overloaded and I need a restart.
Yeah.
And I know I was talking to a friend of mine, Andy, whom I did that other video with. And I showed him a screenshot of my inbox, my email inbox. and I can't remember exactly. It was like 1,600 or something. Um, and I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna be able to do this. And he said, just select all, archive.
Mm.
Sometimes you need a fresh start,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
like
I
with that
think
Slack trick that you showed to me. Cause yeah, if
exactly.
there's so many notifications, like the best thing to do is just to select them all, mark them as unread, and if I guess if people do want to, notify you or like let you know of like important stuff, then they will let you know. So again, fresh restart. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's better. I was talking about this as well with my therapist, actually, my
Mm,
coach, my professional coach, and she was saying, because I always think like, oh, I don't want to mark things as read, because
yeah,
if I do, then that's like I'm ignoring somebody's question. And she said, well, what happens when you do get overloaded? Are you able to answer all the questions? I'm like, well, no, I'm also ignoring them. And she
yeah,
said, so isn't it better for you to communicate instead that, hey, I just can't
yeah,
right now? And she's right. I
yeah,
think sometimes that is better to just say, I'm sorry, people, I'm struggling here. If you've
yeah.
sent me something in the last week, in the last month that I haven't responded to, I've probably archived it. Reach out again if it's really that important.
Yeah. Or there's also the tendency of, hey, you do want to reply to all these messages, but then the response that, you might be giving are, not really great responses. So you're not really giving, the work that you want to do. So
Good
you
point.
might as well just, pause, restart, and, that's also gonna benefit the other person because you're just like, they're just gonna get like poor advice or like something like that if you yourself is already like overloaded with a lot of like different issues.
This is why latency or responsiveness isn't everything. Because if a system replies in 10 milliseconds to every request that you make, but the response says 404 not
Yeah.
found,
Yeah.
was that really useful? It was
What's the
fast,
point of that?
yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe in that case, it's better to just like take the system down and actually fix the problem, because it's not really useful to get an error back.
Yeah. So maybe now we can talk about, okay, so if you are already overloaded, so if a system is already overloaded, if we're already burned out, like what should we do when we're in that position already? So
So if things are,
apart from like taking a fresh, start, like what else could we do?
yeah. So if things are already on fire and there's already some downtime, maybe, or there's already been a few production incidents, I think the first thing that you need to focus on is stemming that tide. So
Mm,
stopping all new releases. Like,
yeah.
there is now a freeze on production. You're not deploying any more builds into it until we figure out what's happening,
Yeah.
because if you don't stem that tide and stop the things that are coming in, then you're just never going to be able to claw your way out of it. So at some point you are going to have to reduce the amount of traffic that's going in, if not stopping it completely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. It's like that saying where, if a cup is like full already, and if it's like overflowing, then you're not really going to be able, to give, or I forgot the whole saying, maybe, like you can't really, I forgot. It's in the tip of my tongue, but it's something about like if a glass is full, then if you're not really taking care of yourself, then how are you gonna take care, of like other
Yeah.
people? So you need to stop when you reach that level, whether stopping like external, um like factors or even like internal ones. Yeah.
I am so guilty of this, because I find myself, even in the midst of burnout,
Yeah.
wanting to start new projects.
Yeah.
um, I think part of it is that I'm kind of just I'm so burnt out on the existing projects that I just want to. I'm trying to wipe the slate clean and do a fresh restart
Mm,
and start on something new.
yeah,
Um, that is one way that where machines are not like humans. It is sometimes, in some ways, like email, we can do a fresh restart. We can't really do a fresh restart of our minds, of, of our physical well-being. It's not a
mm,
switch that you can just be like, okay, reboot. I
yeah,
wish it were,
yeah,
but I do have to really actively stop myself from taking on anything new,
yeah.
even when I'm already struggling. Is that not silly?
And
Machines don't make that problem. Don't
yeah,
make that mistake.
no, yeah. And I think that's is, I guess like something that yeah, we really all need to just be mindful and like improve. And that might be like the type of burnout that you described, because I only found out this morning. So before we continue on like what we can do to prevent. So I only found out this morning that there are subtypes of burnout. So the first one is called frenetic burnout. So this basically occurs when people put so much energy into their work, and because they put all these different like energy, like like different like factors or like resources, like the rewards of the role that they're doing, it doesn't seem to balance the effort that they are investing. So basically, what happens is now there's like a disregard of the boundaries, disregard of the work life balance that you've set. And then there's also another type of burnout called the under challenge burnout. So this is when you feel trapped in like a monotonous environment or a monotonous routine that you don't really feel challenged anymore. So this can like alter your mood, this can alter, I guess, your satisfaction, and this can again like contribute to that burnout stage. And then the last type is called burnout. So this is when at this point people have now given up after experiencing like a longer period of time where I don't know, it could be like their work environment is just like constantly a source of like intense stress. So they just feel very like hopeless like after this stage.
I strongly resonate with the first two, I think.
Mm,
Those are usually my sources. More the first than the second. So I am I am a person that is geared towards work. I'm the kind of person who takes a vacation and finds herself starting a project for the vacation. And
yeah.
then that turns into something that goes beyond the vacation. Um, I am unhappy when I don't have work. I don't like to be bored. I know there's this whole movement about, oh, you should be bored. And I just think whenever I start to feel bored, that's time where I could do something that I really want to do. And I
Mm,
don't run out of things that I want to do or topics I want to explore. So I have felt before the second part where I am just worn out by not having enough stimulation or not learning enough. I'm a challenger. I want to push myself. And if
yeah.
I'm not, then I'm not happy. But
Yeah.
that does mean I'm more susceptible to pushing too hard. What about you?
Yeah, I think I resonate more on the first one, mainly because of my personality as well. So perfectionist, like achiever, like sounds like a pretty bad combination with the like frenetic workout. So I just constantly feel that yep, I'm experiencing this. And this is in no way like anyone's, fault. Like this isn't like my workplace fault, or this isn't like, other people's fault. It's what I what I put myself into. Like no one is asking me, to, make sure that I do this on time, blah blah blah. It's what I've said to myself, as a thing that, oh okay, I've said yes to this. I'm gonna, go the extra mile, and it's just always something that I've done. And sometimes it can, like work really well. That can give me, like a different edge. But yeah, sometimes it could also, you know, not so good because yeah, the downside is that can lead me to a burnout stage too.
Yeah, another reason that I love the analogy of burnout to overloaded systems is that in machines there's no concept of blame, whereas
Mm,
we blame ourselves and
yeah,
maybe our companies or maybe our friends
yeah,
or our relationships, but machines don't work that way. There's no one to blame for increased traffic or insufficient resources. It's just a matter of fixing it. So when we talk about like what we do when something's down, stop all new releases, take an inventory of everything, like what is actually affected. So when I'm honest about my human burnout,
yeah,
I think only a very small part of it is work related. I think I have a lot of things going on in my personal life that I've chosen, and that stuff burns me out as well.
yeah,
But that is one of the first things to map out, like where exactly is the burnout coming from.
yeah. Yeah, I think as well, like if you're in this stage now that you know you're already burnt out, it's really essential that you speak to someone, whether that's you know family, friends, or even like coworkers. And I feel like, for example, with me, like the past couple of weeks, like you and I, we've just like talk
Yeah.
a lot, and not
Yeah.
even like work related. So I think that is
Yeah.
really essential. So you know you're trying to just communicate like how you feel. And I guess this is where like I like at like in our current you know time where like working from home as well is like the norm now, or like working remotely, like we do need that social interaction, and we now have these different tools, so we might as well use that you know in our advantage. Because I think before, and this is why I said at the beginning that the burnout feeling, or you know the stage is much more common now, because before we have all these different like social interactions you know happening, so at least we have that break. Whereas working remotely, it's very hard to you know have that social interaction in place, especially if you're not you know too careful, or if you're not like setting like clear boundaries. Yeah,
Yeah, and that is one of the things that we should do as well, like in the middle of a crisis. I think we need to touch base. We need to look at our observability stack or our monitoring tools and see
yeah,
what is happening in the stack, and establish the communication with each component and be like, hey, are you okay? Are you up? Are
yeah,
you what are your resources like? But there's also a human part of that where it's about the teams that are behind those components. It's
yeah,
like, have you seen anything in your experience? Because they're going through things with a fine tooth
yeah,
comb. But everyone
indeed,
has to come
yeah,
together and
yeah,
like actually hash this out, because it might be that it's not something that is internal to a component. It could be the integration between them.
yeah,
So there is a lot of communication that has to happen.
yeah.
And then I think the next priority would be get the essentials up and running again. This is where we can talk about the book Essentialism, which I really love. I really it is by Greg McKeown,
Mm,
and it is about, it's like minimalism but for your life, not for your things.
mm,
So it's not about doing with less.
yeah,
It's about choosing what's essential and what's not. And the most important part of it, maybe for me, is choosing what's not essential, because I
yeah,
just feel like everything is essential. I just want all the things. But you can't really, there isn't a concept of essential if there isn't a concept of like unnecessary or non essential.
yeah. I guess like if we also translate that, you know, to work, this is where um having, you know, or like dropping things on your like maybe if you've set like OKRs or like objectives already, if if you've initially set one objective but then you feel that that's not really a high priority anymore, like don't just do it for the sake of, hey, it's in my OKR. Like, speak to like your manager and just explain that, hey, there might be some like other like essentials or like other projects that are much more like higher in like priority, so maybe I can focus on that first rather than doing the non-essential things. And it might be essential but for like the next like upcoming quarter, but for now, like, yeah, like you said, just focus on what is important and what's really gonna give you the most value.
I think at some point, hopefully, when you've started to claw your way back, you can start to add things back that
Yeah.
maybe are not essential, but you can do that slowly. But one thing I would definitely do is in the case of the overloaded system that fell down, um, I would definitely improve monitoring and observability, because a lot of the reasons why these things fail over is that we didn't see it happening, because
Yeah.
at some point, if we're early enough, we can actually stop it. So there is going to always be some element of, oh, we weren't looking for that particular warning sign.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important for us as humans to recognize what are our warning signs. I'm
Yeah.
curious, what do you think yours are? Like, are there things that you do that make you think, "Oh, wait a minute, I think I'm getting burnt out."
Yeah, to me it manifests like different ways, but the um the main thing for me is like the lack of sleep, and I would
Mm,
just have like trouble sleeping as well, and like waking up in the middle of the night. So that has happened like maybe two or like three times in a row where, yep, I just have interrupted sleep, and it's hard for me to go back to sleep because my mind is restless, and then the next morning, um the consequence of that is irritability, not just with I guess with just myself, but it can also start to impact like relationships and like other people. So those were like my warning signs that, okay, I need to do something about this, because if I don't, then I'm gonna have like a major breakdown that that will have a detrimental effect. So when I'm on that stage, that's when I'm just, okay, let me just do a restart, like focus on like what is important and take a break. And that might mean like different things. It could be just like taking some time off, or it could be speaking to someone, like talking to a friend about it. And the more you try to release it in like different outlets, like for me, what I find is that, yeah, it does help. And I just need to make sure that I know what those early warning signs are, because
yeah.
in the past I didn't know. Well, I know what the signs are, but I just ignored it. But now I did something about it, because of, yeah, I didn't want to be in that position anymore, where, yeah, it was just that horrible feeling of, you just lose all the motivation and you just feel like helplessness. So yeah, knowing those different
Mm,
early signs, it's really key.
that's good for you. I think for me, I think I sleep pretty well in general. I
Yeah.
mean, I will push myself sometimes, but in general, I'm a pretty good sleeper. So for me, the warning signs or the alerts that go off, they go
Mm,
off because I I find moments of selfishness in me, in
mm,
the way, in my relationships, in the way that I interact with people. This could be like, I've noticed I have a shorter temper recently. I think I'm more blunt. My natural inclination is to be very blunt. I'm very Dutch that way. I feel I really resonate with that, like, just frankness. But
yeah.
I should try to soften that, because
Mm,
not everybody is like that, and that's one of the first things to go. just
Yeah.
these filters that I put into place of like, oh, hey, I need to be empathetic, I need to listen to the other people. Those are the first things that
Don't.
get worn
Uh,
down when
yeah.
I'm being burnt out. And how that manifests is some damage to relationships that I have, or like the people that I love the most saying like, that was really harsh, or
Yeah.
you didn't need to say it like that, or you didn't need to do that, like, did you think of me? And
Mm,
when different people that I love for different reasons start telling me those things, that
yeah.
is a huge warning sign for me. It's almost like it comes back to the insufficient internal resources thing. It's like my body is telling me I just physically can't give more. So you're asking me to be empathetic about somebody else when I'm not even empathetic with myself. And I think that's something where I just have to listen to those inclinations. And I mean, it doesn't excuse that behavior,
Yeah.
but it's more like a prompt to do something about it.
Yeah. That's really and this is what I mean, like it manifests to us like differently. And what happens, or like my early signs will look different to early signs. I wish I can sleep that well as well. But yeah, it's just differently, and it's up to you to know like what these early signs are. Like no one is gonna help you like find it. So this is where, yeah, you really need to have that self, sort of like realization, like about yourself, as to what are the important things, and what are things that can manifest if you start like experiencing like burnout earlier.
And then on the other side of burnout as well, you can, when once you've learned to identify what those things are that make your dashboard light up and
Mm,
that should be screaming at you to do something, I think one of the things that you can do is automate some of these, like automate the garbage collection that comes,
mm,
automate the load balancing. It's like putting things into a CI/CD pipeline so that you don't even have to think about it. It doesn't have to be habit. It's just like it's already part of your schedule.
yeah.
And the best thing that you can do is automate self-care, I think. So for me, that looks like scheduling for
Yeah.
things that are important, that are garbage collection for me. And those are things like time with family, time with friends.
Yeah.
I play a lot of tabletop role playing games, and it's completely not work related, and I resist the urge to turn that into content or something
Yeah.
productive, because I just want it to be fun, because I need that fun. And once it's on my calendar, I find it easier to stick to. What
Yeah.
about you? How do you automate self-care?
More or less the same. So I've been really like strict with like my schedules lately. I caught up with friends last week, just to have some of that um like non-work, like quality time. And then I've been really like just careful with my schedule. So if I need to be focused on like certain tasks, I put chunks on my calendar as to what these tasks are. So at least like for me, I know that, okay, like for this time, if someone like tries to schedule a meeting with me, then it will be automatically declined because of like this reason. So making sure that like there's a way of like structure like going forward, and I'm not just falling into the trap of like saying yes to like everything again. I think that's one way of like automating the self-care, or like the prevention in like another way. And like doing like daily walks or like exercises. So what I realized as well, I forgot to mention, one of my early sign was, so I love working out, I love exercising, but then on this period,
Wow.
I stopped for a bit. Like
Oh,
there was no movement, like there was no form of exercise. So I was like, yeah, this isn't good. This is my sign that, yep, I'm gonna
yeah.
experiencing burnout. So now I'm back to my like old routine again. And that is, a form of self-care, because you're taking care of your body, you're taking care of like how you're feeling, whether that's via exercise or like something else. But for me, yeah, it's those things.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I also think that it's worth mentioning that I've been comparing machines and humans this whole time,
Mm.
but there are obviously many, many ways in which human burnout is not the same as an overloaded system. I think maybe one of the most sobering differences is that human burnout can be harder to spot, take
Yeah.
longer to recover from, and can also have way more severe ramifications if it's not checked or fixed or
Yeah.
done some if you don't do something to prevent it later on, because machines can recover, machines can be restarted,
Yeah.
and humans can't be.
Yeah, they don't have feelings, they don't have emotion, so it's much easier for them.
Yeah. On the bright side, humans also have a greater capacity for resilience than machines do,
Yeah.
because machines need something concrete to change to feel better, to work better.
Mhm.
But humans, sometimes all it takes is like reframing the way that you think about the world or yourself. It could be going and having a good cry and consistently choosing yourself and self-care over working yourself to the bone.
I love that. That's a perfect way to end this episode. Awesome. Yes, so yeah, I think that's it for today. Next week we have another exciting episode. So we're back with another special guest. We can't wait to speak to this person, but I'm not gonna spoil anything. You all have to wait for next week. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed our conversation today. And if you're experiencing, burnout, ask for help, reach out. It's totally okay to be vulnerable at this stage. The best thing that you can do now is, yeah, you need to speak to someone. You need to make sure that you know what the early signs are, and you have some things in place to make sure that you can recover. And it's not a race to make sure that, hey, you're better tomorrow or like the next day. It can take a while, and that is okay, as long as there's small steps that you try and do. I think that's the more important part. Yeah.
Well
Awesome.
said.
Well,
Be kind to
yeah,
yourself.
exactly. Okay, well, yeah, that's it for today. And yeah, hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you all back next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.